So there are a few tweaks I did on my typical settings I use for the RICOH GRIII that I'd like to share in today's video. And I was out taking pictures this week, so this video will be a mix of me explaining and breaking down some of the compositions and updating you on the settings. The number one thing I changed in terms of importance are my autofocus settings, and I did a video, quite extensive one, talking about the snap distance priority mode that I still use a lot to this day. I assigned it to the right button of the back wheel, so I can very quickly switch between this mode and a more traditional way of focusing. So the changes I did are on the more traditional way of focusing. I used to disable the autofocus on the shutter button and use the FN button as a sort of back button focusing kind of thing. The RICOH GRs are superb cameras in terms of ergonomics. If you consider the size, they are very easy to use and you have access to plenty of button and functions, but in the end, using the FN button as a back button focus is not very comfortable, I would say. I guess it's due to its size and the lack of grip. So I scrapped that and assigned back the focus on the shutter button. I usually keep my focus point in the center, focus and recompose. When I know that I will take photos of people in motion or walking or family photos, I switch to the more wide autofocus setting, the one that covers all the center part of the frame. I did not completely get rid of the FN button. I use it now as a switch to enter the manual focus mode, so I can focus with the shutter button, lock it by switching to manual focus, and then I can wait for my scene to develop, which is a lot more comfortable than waiting all this time with the shutter button half pressed. Last thing that I actually already mentioned in that old setting video is the touch functions, and I still use the touch, focus and shoot function. It is very useful. One example, it is very good when you want to take photos of people coming from the opposite direction, and when you walk by, if you want to capture them at 2.8 for a little bit of bokeh, you just touch the screen and the camera will only take the photo at the exact moment where it acquires focus. So here I find a very good opportunity for a silhouette shot. As you can see here on the back, there's a door that is lit from the back, and I used this kind of a frame sort of thing. It's not even a window because there's no window, there's no glass, to frame my shot, have a little bit of foreground element and create a frame within a frame. The door itself also is a frame in the frame, and it creates a nice silhouette just like we see now. And it was just about waiting the perfect moment. Here we can play something with the colors. I found this building very interesting looking, the shape, and it looks quite new. The paint is fresh. We have blue and bright yellow. It looks good. And we are lucky now, there's a yellow car. It's not exactly the same nuance, but it's pretty close. So it would be nice to have someone walking here to complete the frame, and with a blue outfit, blue, almost the same blue as this one. So it would be blue, yellow, yellow, blue. So yeah, it would create a nice, playful, colored photo, I think. On this one, I feel like I was a little bit stubborn and never really questioned whether that was a good thing to do or not, but I always set my cameras to -0.3 on the exposure compensation, and sometimes even going to -0.7 for no particular reason. Not only I did it myself, but I also advised in favor of doing that many times on my channel. I added a little nuance that when shooting in very cloudy weather, or if shooting snow, you should park it somewhere at +0.7 or +0.3. But now I shoot most of the time with the exposure compensation set at 0, with the metering mode that covers all the frame. There are a few reasons why I proceed like that right now, and first is that you simply have plenty of room to recover your highlights if it's something you want to do, even when shooting at 0 on the exposure compensation. I really want to stress that, and the main point I want to communicate in this video is that you should be more intentional with the way you use the EV compensation. Not all photos need to have recover the highlights and lift up shadows. I think if you always try to maximize the dynamic range of your photos, you will end up with some HDR-ish looking photos that really lack any sort of contrast and impact. By having a base exposure a bit brighter than usual, you will also have better looking midtones and shadows after editing. When you bump up a little bit the exposure in post, they will look a lot better than if you had to boost them a lot because you shot at negative exposure compensation. I know that you still have plenty of information in the shadows when shooting at -0.3 or even lower on the exposure compensation. I've done that for a very long time actually, but now I find that the final results after editing, when you have to fix the exposure so much, feels a little bit mushy and not very clean. Overall, I think you will have better and brighter looking images when you shoot at 0 on the exposure compensation, and if your highlights are getting a little bit hot, I think it's not a bad thing actually. This is my personal opinion on the shooting and editing, but if you are shooting backlit, let's say, I think it is totally normal to have the highlights being almost dazzling and very bright basically. We have more dynamic range in our eyes compared to a camera sensor, but that's how we feel when we are walking the streets facing the sun. We have to almost close our eyes to try to see something. So yeah, now I set my exposure compensation at 0 and I try to be more intentional. If I go for a very high contrast highlight shadow kind of thing, I would reduce the exposure compensation. Same if I want to keep all the colors in a beautiful sunset or sunrise, but other than that, it's at 0.
Here is another example of the importance of your camera placement, because this scene is nothing too crazy, just like the calmness of it. But here I hold my iPhone at eye level and you see the guy is get mixed with the black door behind. But if I do that, like bringing my camera up, we can separate him from the black door and we have a much easier to read photo in the end. Spring is around the corner and you can see that the green in the trees are coming back, so it looks good. I just like how beautiful and quite big this tree is compared to the other ones. And we also have this strange kind of building behind it, so it adds a little bit of interest to the photo, especially because the tree is so big that it covers a good part of the building. We cannot see everything. And yeah, I just placed myself really in the center and made the tree the center point of the frame, and that's it.
So let's talk about white balance now, and somehow this is something I changed a long time ago on my Sony a7 IV, but somehow I didn't apply the same principle with my RICOH GR3 or even my Fuji X-E4, and it is setting my white balance to the daylight basic setting. I shoot RAW anyway, so I have all the freedom to adjust in post, but I think keeping your white balance set at the same level really ensures more consistency in your images if you edit them and post them in a set. By having it set to one fixed value, if one photo look warmer or cooler than the other one, it really just shows that the conditions when out shooting were different, and to me it's normal that the final results should show that. Something neutral white like a t-shirt should not look the same during the golden hour of a very bright day and under pouring rain. The shooting experience is also better because in some situations, it is rare but it happens, that you actually see your screen and your frame changing drastically depending on how you position your camera. It might be because there's a tungsten light or something that really just bother the algorithm of your camera, and the camera cannot figure out how to adjust the automatic white balance. It is frustrating and it could prevent you from shooting the decisive moment, or it could also prevent you from shooting the photo altogether because the feedback you have on the screen is not very satisfactory or is so different from what you can see in real life. A fellow photographer and YouTuber called Sean Tucker did a video recently talking extensively about his approach using the white balance, and I agree with everything he said in the video. He spoke about it very eloquently, way better than me, so go check his video if you want more reasoning about why shooting daylight white balance is a good thing. I linked that in the description.
So here we have a pretty rare situation because basically this is the main shopping street of Hiroshima, but there's no one at the moment. It's like 6:30 in the morning. So what I want is some sort of a silhouette shot, but I think the contrast is not high enough. My subject get lost in the shadows there, but let's try getting a bit closer. This variation might work a bit better. I was a bit stubborn in trying to have something very symmetrical, but here I guess this angle works quite well, and I want a subject to walk by on the left part of the frame, but still there's a lack of bright area here on the left part of the frame where the subject would walk to create a good enough subject separation. You see the windows, they are quite dark, so our subject gets lost in the shadow. Maybe if they walk closer, coming from the right and going left on that other street, so more like 10 meters away from me, could work better.
And the last thing I want to mention is the LCD screen brightness. On the GR you can adjust the brightness of the screen just like most cameras, but the GRs don't have a viewfinder, as we all know. When shooting in broad daylight and struggling to see what's on the screen, I would always use the viewfinder to check my exposure, but that's something that we cannot do on the RICOH. To compensate for that, I would usually crank up the LCD brightness to +2, but now with experience I think it misled me a lot with the way I expose my images. On screen they would look perfectly fine, but when importing the photos to my computer they would look very dark. And I know it's only about the LCD screen brightness, it shouldn't affect the exposure of the images, but I'm talking personal experience and I had a lot of struggles with that. It is not the best solution because without viewfinder there is no perfect workaround, but now I do my best to keep the LCD brightness at 0, trusting my exposure settings explained earlier, and if I really want to check the exposure I would try to find some shadows or creating some shadows with my hands or my clothes to have a better sense of what the exposure looked like. And bonus point, you're also saving a little bit of battery, which could be crucial. Maybe in these 5 or 10 additional shots, there could be a keeper.
Here it's pretty simple. I want a symmetrical composition with maybe someone walking very in the middle, but usually people try to walk either on the left or the right side of the street, so I wish they were a bit more bold and always walking in the center of the street, but yeah, let's wait and see. Here I just like this street corner, nothing totally crazy, and I think it looks good just as it is, but if I want to incorporate or wait for a human subject to walk in the frame, where I would place it is here, because if we look at everything around here, this is the only place where we could have a decent subject separation. Here you have some elements too close to each other, so it's a bit messy. Here it's too dark, also here a bit messy, so yeah, definitely here is the only place.
Okay, so that's it about the last updates I did on my settings for my RICOH GR3. This is how I use it right now, but it might change later. Settings are here to support a shooting experience that is individual to each and every one. That could work for me, but not for you. It might also be suited for my shooting style right now, but not anymore in a few months or a few years. So please take these settings videos with a grain of salt and use them as an inspiration, as a starting point to experiment on your own, because it's only by personal experience that you will know and understand what you need, what is your shooting style, and how you need to adjust your camera to fit that. So thanks for watching, see you next time, bye.